In this interview, I meet up with Judy Sarden, who is the author of Sarden's Practical Guide, How to Start Homeschooling. She is the host of How to Homeschool podcast and speaks nationally on home education and general education topics. She is a corporate attorney over 20 years. Judy has homeschooled her 2 children for 8 years. Let's welcome Judy. Thank you so much for coming in today and joining me on this interview. Pleasure to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So I want to start off by asking you, what are the 3 questions that parents should be asking right now about returning their kids to school in the fall?
Okay. The first question you need to ask is, how well did the spring go? A lot of people were, they were caught unawares of, obviously, people who had never homeschooled before all of a sudden had their kids at home. And the children were doing, well, it's all over the board. Some kids had nothing. Some kids had a handwritten packet that they had to fill out during the week that the parents had to help them with. And some kids had all day online homeschooling. So the first thing you need to ask is, how did that go for you? And the reason why you need to ask that is because as we're moving into the fall, a lot of schools are talking about doing 100% online homeschooling. And now that's going to be school at home. It's going to be, across the board. Everybody's going to get the same thing. Everybody's going to have the same assignments. If it didn't work for you in the spring, it's probably not going to work for you in the fall. Some schools are talking about having on-site. Okay, if your child does go on-site and someone is diagnosed with COVID, that's anyone, not only someone at the school, but a family member of anyone at the school. That person's probably going to be quarantined and the school's probably going to shut back down again. And they're going to be back in the same situation where you were in the spring. And so that number one question is, how do things go for you in the spring? Because you may very well be looking at the same thing in the fall. Yeah. Okay, the second thing is, how can you create a better environment for your child? What's the best way to create that environment? Children at this point, with the isolation that they've endured over the last few months, and a lot of children were really traumatized by the whole online experience, the isolation. Some places have continued over the summer. Right now, we've got to focus on stability for our kids, and we've got to focus on a sense of normalcy. So the second thing is, how can you create the stability and the normalcy? Is putting them back in school, inside of physical school that may end up shutting down again? Is that going to be the best way of creating stability and normalcy? Is going to 100% online going to help you create a sense of normalcy? And so that's the second thing. How are you going to create the stability and normalcy that your kids desperately need right now? This COVID thing is probably going to last at least through December. And so I'm not asking you to plan for the next 10 years of your kids' education, but let's just look at the next 6 months or maybe the next 12 when I'm talking about this. So, okay, so the first one is, how did the spring work for you? Can you handle that in the fall? Next is, how can you create this sense of normalcy and stability? And then the third is, based on 1 and 2, what can you do to create the optimal education environment within your family's structure and needs? So for example, if you have 2 parents who work outside the home, let's start looking at ways that we can create stability and normalcy outside of the class environment. Because I urge people, I've been urging all of my clients to plan to homeschool, home educate, independent study, whatever you want to call it. Make that your plan A.
Yes.
Because sitting back and waiting for what the school's going to do, fretting over it, and then being at the mercy of their changing policies. And it's not their fault. The government is changing policies, the CDC is changing policies. Nobody really knows what's going on. And so rather than sit back and be at the mercy of that, be proactive. So based on 1 and 2, what can you now do to create the normalcy and stability and the best educational environment for your child? So those are my 3 questions to ask. I know it's a lot, but it's something parents need to start thinking about today.
Yeah.
Really.
Especially, those questions are going to get you thinking about, not thinking about what am I going to do, but instead of what can we do, right? Like it's a
Yes.
proactive way of
Yes.
dealing with this choice. And also you want to give our kids a sense of stability, as you said, and they can't feel us feeling that fear. Like if I feel it, my son can feel it, right? They're very good at sensing that, right?
That's exactly right. And you make a good point, because a lot of the anxiety, a lot of people are experiencing high anxiety and fear. And we are giving that to our kids. And the children honestly have already, over the last couple of years, with the active shooter drills and all this other stuff that's going on in the schools that kind of create that sense of fear and anxiety in them. Now we are adding this on top.
Mm-hmm.
This is a lot for little minds to take. And so the more that you can show that you're being proactive, that you're taking control, that will help to lower your children's anxiety and their own fear, because we don't want to pass that on to them. That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm. And when they're doing these questions, they could do it as a family. Do you recommend doing it with the kids, or like doing it as a parent? Like, what is your recommendation?
I would say, what I would say is, as a parent, maybe kind of come up with some solutions, maybe, option 1 and 2, and presenting it, because it is very anxiety producing for parents.
Yeah.
And so if you're in that space, you need to get yourself to a point where you can discuss these things in where your level of anxiety is low. So if you've already had this, if you've hashed it out with your co-parent or with whomever, and you've kind of narrowed it down to a couple of things that will work, you can present it in a much better way to your children who are watching you. Kids watch us everything we do. They watch. They may not listen to what we're saying, but they're watching us. Yeah. And so that way you can present it in a better light. I think if you've already decided that, yes, I'm going to present these 3 options, and I know any of these options will work.
Yes. I mean, they do deal with it really well, the kids, because my son had his dad was sick in last July. He had a massive heart attack, and he was on life support. And it was my first time dealing with someone that's really close, right? And he's only 12 at that time. And I was like, okay, how can I explain this to him? Like, what way would it make sense to him, right? And then I sat down and I said, okay, like I'm pretty good with math and systematic way of thinking. I said, okay, let's put that to effect and see if it works. I just gave it a try. And I said, okay, here are your 6 options, Jay, like to my son. Either one of these is going to happen. Like you just need to be ready. So I just kind of started with the good one. He's going to come out and play, and we're going to be in the park and doing stuff, until all the way to he might not make it. But these are the 6 things. So I gave him a lot of different ones in the middle. I didn't want to give 2, but I gave him 6. So I went from really, really beautiful to really, really bad, right? But he was like, after that, if I'm ever sad, or if I'm driving him to hospital and if I'm sad, he would say, Mom, one of the 6 things will happen. Why are you worrying? That's right? Awesome. He started using back at me. Yes. So I said, oh, wow, that was so powerful. Yes. It was my first time trying it. So kids do really understand when you give them a systematic way of thinking of a situation, which is what we're in right now, right? Absolutely. So going with plans and talking to them really works. I saw it firsthand work last July. That was my state. I had to figure out how to tell him, but he did make it back. He got his first choice. His dad is out there happy. So he understands now how the system thinking works.
That's great. And I think that a lot of people, kids can take more than what we give them credit for, but you led that. So you thought about it beforehand and you led, and now your son has picked it up. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And that's what I think, as you're saying, and my mind is going through that example, is what I think parents could present right now. And I've been talking to my son now about it too, but his choice is still, he's going to high school. This is his first year in high school. He's like, I really want to go, Mom. I really want to go. I said, okay, we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll
Sure.
see. Right. We're still on that bargaining table. Still.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as they get older, it's difficult too, right? Because they do have a mind of their own. They have their friendships. And then, you have to be careful. I think it's a little bit of a,
I think that even with friendships, if they can continue being friends even if school isn't in.
and yeah.
My daughter texts her friends and she FaceTimes them, and we haven't gotten together with any friends. No, we have gotten together with one set of friends. We went on a hike, so we were outside, and but other than that, we haven't gotten together with any friends. But they've been keeping in touch
Mhm.
in many ways. So it's different, but you can still do it. It's not
Yeah.
insurmountable.
I mean, look at us. We're, on this
Yeah,
call.
that's right.
Like we're connecting. So yeah, kids will be fine. I mean, it's if it's the best choice for the family and the child, right?
Yes.
But something else you also said earlier was that parents have noticed that their kids are working better during this fall, in the springtime. They notice something about their child,
Yes.
right? Can we go
Yes.
over that a little bit?
Yeah. So, some children who have maybe were struggling in school, and even some kids who weren't struggling, have found that the condensed workday, they're shocked to find that they can actually get their schoolwork done in 3 hours, 4 hours. So, just take an example of a child that I know. They're up at 6:30. They're on the bus to go to school. They're in school by 8:30. They're in school all day until 3:30. And then they are bused home. So it's 4 o'clock now. And then once they get home at 4, they have sports practice. So by the time they get done with sports practice and eat, it's 8, 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
This child's grades were suffering big time. And he'd always struggle in school.
Yeah.
And it's like the light bulb went on during the shutdown, because he was able to get his schoolwork done in 3 hours.
Mhm.
He was more engaged, and his grades skyrocketed. His grades are better now than they have ever been. He's going to 10th grade. So he's happier now, because if he gets up at 8 or 9 o'clock, he's done by 12, 1 o'clock.
Wow.
And he can rest. He can do whatever teenage boys like to do. He takes a whole lot of naps. He gets the rest he needs, and he still goes and plays his sport, but he's refreshed, he's happier. And I've talked to a lot of parents who have seen this change in their kids. And parents are beginning to ask, well, what were they doing in school all day?
Mhm.
They're wasting a lot of time because they had to fill up those hours. If you have 8 hours to get something done, it will take you 8 hours.
Yeah.
But now, given the option of this child who's traditionally not been a good student, is actually really thriving. And so I've talked to many, many parents who have seen the same blossoming of their children. It's less angsty, it's just everything about him and his attitude has greatly improved, actually, since he's been able to get his work done and just be done with it.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's when you homeschool, you can cater your kids' education, their classes, to their interests, to whatever their end game is.
Yes.
And you can get it done in a fraction of the time that it took them to get it done in a classroom setting.
Yeah. It's a lot of shifting from class to class and recess and lunchtime and lining up and
Yes.
yes, behaviors, right? There's lots going on in those hours, not just learning
Yeah.
happening, and learning is very probably chunked into very short time like that. If you take
And
all of the learning time, right? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really is. And when you think of a child who's easily distracted, who's having difficulty learning in that kind of environment, having the quiet environment of home without the distractions can make the difference.
Yeah, best environment for him.
Mhm.
Yes. Why do you say that home education is better than private school?
So a lot of people say, okay, well, public school is public school, it's a government school and
Yeah.
they're teaching to the test and all that. So they will opt for private school. Well, while private schools can be better than the public school, children are still in that school setting for X number of hours a day because, of course, that's what school has been traditionally, at least recently, in recent history, has been thought of. It's so they're still there. They're still having to fill in a lot of stuff. And then lastly, while a private school may have a slightly broader range of classes, unless they're at one of the really large classes here. I live in Atlanta, so here in Atlanta they have some really big private schools that may have a broader range of classes that a child could take in a public school setting. However, when you homeschool, and what no school can do because they have too many students, you can truly cater your child's learning. So for example, with my son, he struggled with language arts. And so we were able to keep him barely, just on grade level, but he excelled in math. He was able to run years ahead in math. I was able to read the history to him, read his science to him. I was able to do all of these things to keep him years ahead in all the subjects. And in the English language arts, we just kept plugging along. He never knew he was behind. He was never sent to, a different class for the slow kids. He never experienced any of that. In a private school, they would have that kind of service, but that with that kind of service comes a stigma.
Yeah.
And so he never had to experience the stigma of dealing with the one area where he just struggled with.
Yep.
He struggled with it for years. He doesn't any longer, but for years during the formative education years, during those years when he's developing an opinion about himself, that struggle in that one subject would have become his entire life if he had been in school.
Yeah.
It would have become his entire life. But instead, he was able to feel good about the fact that he was doing math that was 2 grade levels ahead. He was able to feel good about the fact that he's scoring always in the 90th percentile in the science and the history and the other parts of his standardized testing because he could read. He just didn't read fast like the schools would have wanted him to. He read and comprehended just fine. But schools have this fluency thing where you're supposed to read so many words in a minute, and he just struggled with that for years. But his comprehension always was good, but he would have been held back because of his fluency. And I know because I had him evaluated by our local school and they wanted to put him back a grade level, despite the fact that his standardized test scores showed him years ahead in every subject. And on level with English language arts, they still wanted to hold him back because of his reading fluency.
Wow.
And they also wanted to put him in a special class. But of course, for me, he's a Black boy, and he would have been probably one of 2 Black boys in the whole grade in this school. And I think there are all kinds of connotations with that. But anyway, they immediately wanted to put him back despite his test scores, his standardized test scores. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so those are the things that you can do that a private school even can't do. They're going to have a standard course for 6th graders. You might be able to move some maths around, but everybody's going to take the same history. Everybody's going to take the same whatever. And again, in a homeschooling environment, you can cater everything for your child. You have a child who's behind, like I did, only in one area. You can work on that area without the stigma. And the beauty of it is that you can really let them fly in the areas where they excel, so that is what they're thinking of. They're thinking of how awesome it is that they can explore this and they can explore that. You can come up with field trips. You can contact local universities to see if they can, for an older child, see if they can, if your kid loves rocks, find a geology professor and see if your kid can do work with him on his research. There's so many things that you can do to expand your child's universe when
Yeah.
you're homeschooling that even a $30,000 a year private school simply can't do.
No. And you can, even if you need help in one area as a parent, if you're not able to help them, you can always get somebody to help, even just in that area. Like, for example, math and science sometimes, right? Or English even, right?
Absolutely, because I was a lawyer for 20 years, and now that my son is in Algebra 1, I am tapped out. So I am not teaching him another day of math ever. And so I'm like up to 5th, 6th grade, I'm good. I can do the rest of it, but I don't want to.
Yes.
I don't want to have to study algebra
Relearn again.
so, and I am not going to. Geometry, blah. So, yes, I'll be farming out math forever until he graduates. He'll either take a dual enrollment, he'll take a direct enrollment at the university. We have several universities near where we live, or he'll take it from a math teacher. So we have that. Science, I've already identified the place where he's going to do his science labs.
Nice.
I think I'll put him in anatomy this year. But I don't want to do a science lab. I'll do science book with him, and in fact, he can do it by himself. He's pretty independent. We've been homeschooling for 8 years, so I've gotten to a point of independence, which is another point. Hopefully, I remember to come back to that. So he can read the assignment himself. He can read the chapter in the book. He can, on his own, do the questions in the back of the book, in the back of the chapter, and then I can check it. And my teacher's manual has the tests. I can give him the tests done without me having to do any teaching of the science. And then I can take him to this place that's designed for homeschool kids, where all their high school classes are the labs.
Okay.
That they would typically have to take in a high school setting.
Nice.
I don't have to do any labs at home. So that's what I'm doing for science. We're going to do the book work here. He'll do the labs there. So that's math, that's science. And then I'm also signing him up for a high school composition class. I was a lawyer. I wrote contracts. So I'm a pretty good writer, but I don't want to teach composition and literature. So somebody else will be teaching him that as well. And then everything else he can do independent study here. Oh, he does Spanish also. He has a Spanish teacher who's in Guatemala.
Wow.
So it's one-on-one, and he's working with a native speaker. So, you can pick and choose things that you want your kids to do, but it's 100% customized. And by the way, my son's going in 8th grade, and all these classes that I just told you are high school level classes.
Wow.
Because he can take it. I would never be able to make this fly if he was in a public school, in a public or private school. He'd have to wait. And so, that's again, the beauty of homeschooling is that you can really customize your kid's education, and he's intelligent enough, he can be on a fast track. And the thing that I want to get back to the independence, and I explained this to some of my clients, your brick and mortar school kid gets up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and if they're in any kind of outside activities, sports or whatever, they're typically not getting, their entire day is scheduled.
Yes.
The children have no autonomy at all. And that's all the way up to 7th to 12th grade, to the top grade. And then we expect them to graduate and go to a college setting where they have class 3 hours a day, maybe. And we expect them to be able to manage the rest of their time. And we're disappointed when they can't. And I submit that is unrealistic, because their time has been scheduled.
Yes.
12, 15 hours a day, every day, their entire lives.
Yes.
So with homeschooling, your child can become independent. Like I said, my kids can, even his math he's online, and they have 4 subjects that they have to get done every day. They can do in whatever order they please. They can do it when they please. They can do it when they first get up in the morning, or they can do it at 9 o'clock at night. I really don't care. So as long as they check it off of their planner by the end of the day. So they have 4 core subjects that they both have to get done every day. And then they have other things that have to get done during the week.
Mhm.
So at the beginning of the week, we sit down, we calendar what their activities are. My daughter's in camp right now, so she had camp this week. So she doesn't have to do the 4, she just has to do 2. But if they have practices, if they have different things that they have going on, so they put that in their calendar, and then those electives that they have to get done whatever during the week, they calendar those on the days where they have maybe no practices.
Mm.
So again, they have the autonomy,
Of creating it.
yes, to create they have a structure, but they have autonomy within the structure.
Yes.
And so by teaching them how to do this every week, by the time, and some days we might not get school done at all because we just have a lot of stuff to do.
Yes.
And then they calendar ahead of time. Well, I know, like, my son has a tournament all day Friday, so he has no school on Friday. So he's got to figure out how he's going to get it done Monday through Thursday.
Yes.
And he calendars that at the beginning of the week. And so he's independent. He's not 100% independent. I mean, he is 12, about to be 13, but working to that place. And those are the things that you cannot do with your child in a brick and mortar school.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, is homeschooling, home education, independent study, whatever you want to call it. To me, that is the absolute best benefit of it, is that you truly can prepare your child for college in a way that no other school situation allows you to.
No, I believe so. Yeah. Yeah. You're teaching him very valuable skills. And I was going to ask, you've chosen a curriculum, right, for your kids? Like, is that mishmash? Like, do you choose different from different places? Because, like right now, a lot of conversation is about what curriculum do I choose, right?
So as far as curriculum, yes, everybody is concerned about curriculum. And I just wrapped up a class where I talked to people about choosing curriculum, and everybody wants to jump into a curriculum. And a couple of things that I tell people that they need to back it up. Before you jump into a curriculum, you need to think about certain things. You need to think about, first off, what are your laws in your state? Because every state here in the US has a different homeschool law. I don't know how it is there in Canada, but every state here has a different homeschool law. So first thing you have to do is know what the laws are in your state, learn what you have to do, what classes you have to cover. So that's the first thing you have to do. You have to know what you have to teach before you just jump out into a curriculum. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing you need to do is think about what your schedule is. So if you've got little kids, if you've got a kindergartner, 90 minutes a day is probably the max all that a kindergartner needs. And that's the max, that's on the high end. All the way up to a high school senior, probably 4 hours. Because reading a lesson doesn't take long. Kids might be in a classroom for an hour, hour and a half in a school, but I could get any math lesson that I've ever taught my kids taught in 15 to 20 minutes. And then they can do their homework and be done in 30, 40 minutes. Okay, so we're done with math in 30, 40 minutes a day. It just doesn't take that long. And so when you're thinking about homeschooling, even if both parents work, there might be 2 or 3 hours a day that you could commit to homeschooling, and your kids could do independent work on the other times while you're working. And so before you choose curriculum, figure out what your schedule is, figure out what you have time to do, because that's going to dictate what curriculum and what kind of curriculum you get. If you know that you've got 3 kids and you only have 2 hours a day that you can dedicate to sit down with them, you're not going to choose anything that's a classical curriculum, because it's highly literature based, it's a lot of writing involved, and you just don't have time to implement it. And so you've got to sit down and really be honest with yourself about the kind of time you have. Or if you can hire a tutor or a nanny to help supplement it. If you can hire a tutor or nanny, then the possibilities are wide open. But if you're going to try to do it yourself, you've got to be honest with yourself about how much time you actually have. So again, before you choose curriculum, so look at your laws, look at how much time you have. And the next thing is look at your kids. You've got to figure out, do an assessment. And I always suggest that people do an independent assessment,
Okay.
because schools always will give you their own assessment, but it's my experience that they are typically colored by, if any teacher had any problem with your kid, your assessment's going to be colored by that bias. And so I recommend people do their own assessments. And there are a number of ways that you can do this, free or low cost. You don't have to, everybody doesn't have to go to a psychologist and have an evaluation, but to assess them. Because like I said, with my son, you might see a kid who maybe made all A's,
Yeah.
but you actually find that they were able to fake their way through maybe this subject and this subject, and they actually really have some gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's okay if you get, now I know, okay, I have a kid, this kid is maybe behind in math, they have some gaps. So instead of getting, if they're going to sixth grade, maybe instead of getting the sixth grade curriculum, I'm going to get the fifth grade.
Yeah.
Because it's okay, because you can run through it really fast and the stuff where you can see that they don't have a gap. But then on the stuff that they do have a gap, you can spend that time, close that gap, and then you probably can get through the entire curriculum in 6 months, and then you can move on to the sixth grade. So that if you decide to put your kid back in school next year, they won't have any more gaps. So, because those gaps will catch up with them as they get older. So now I encourage people to take this time as a gift, because it can help you to close a lot of those gaps and help you to remedy some of the things that you knew or didn't know, your kid had issues with. So that's the next thing. Do an assessment, figure out where your kid is in each subject, because your kid might be at different places in different subjects.
Yes.
So now that you've gathered all of this information, then you're looking at whether you want online curriculum. I don't recommend 100% online curriculum for any kid, maybe unless they're in 11th or 12th grade, because they do need some in-person. So you can look at online curriculum. You can get a box curriculum. If you just have to do it, then you just do it. If you just have to do all online. If you don't have to, I recommend try to find some things that are in person. So you can look at online curriculum where it's a full curriculum online, public or private. You can look at doing a la carte online, like what I've described I do with my son. You can look at local co-op groups that offer classes for homeschoolers. You can look at your local junior colleges. If you've got a high school student, you might be able to find some local junior college classes that they can take and get high school and college credit for. You can look at dual enrollment, straight dual enrollment. There's so many options. So yeah, I recommend, if you are even thinking about it, talk to somebody, talk to me. This is what I do for a living. I help people plan strategically what their an education plan for their children. So yeah, there's so many options, so many things you need to look at before you choose curriculum. Yes. And ways to narrow it down before you even get to the actual choosing of the curriculum.
Exactly. Yeah. Very, very important not to jump in, because that's where sometimes I think the over expectation or excitement, right? Because as a new homeschooling mom, I might get really excited. What do I do? Where do I start? Let's put all those things and fix it all up, and then kind of get overwhelmed very quickly, right? So you have to be balanced.
It's really easy, especially if you have older children. When my children started, they were 3 and 5, and so I just figured, you can't mess up kindergarten. If I read to my kids and we do some math, they'll be fine. Yes. But if you have an older children, and just to tell you, I spent 3 years wasting time. I bought curriculum. I probably bought 3 or 4 maths. I bought definitely 3 or 4 language arts. Science, I won't even tell you how many science curricula that I went through trying to figure it out. And so that's why I recommend people, talk to somebody, get some help, get some coaching to help you to kind of navigate it. Particularly if you have an older child, you don't have 3 years to mess around. You kind of got to get it kind of mostly right. Yes. Over this next year. And it's totally possible. It's totally doable. Yeah. To do it even in a way that you can easily put your kid back in school next year. But yeah, so definitely, there's so many, there are tons of options out there.
Yeah, resources, right? Do research.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely, for sure. So why do you say that education plan is the standard for future for kids?
Yeah, so like I was saying, when I here's kind of old philosophy. Old philosophy is, okay, when you're ninth grade, you take these classes and you just take them. And you have, regular honors or AP.
Mhm.
When you're 10th grade, everybody takes this stuff. So when I was growing up, there was a separate track for kids who weren't going to college.
Okay.
They could take shop where they learned how to work with their hands. They could take automotive where they could learn how to work, fix cars. There was a track for kind of the pink professions where they could learn secretarial skills, how to be a secretary, or call it what, an administrative assistant now. Back then it was secretary. So there were all these different classes that were offered at the high school that were, you could take to graduate. And then they had kind of the regular track, and then they have the honors track for
Mhm.
kids who were wanting to go into engineering and things like that.
Mhm.
Now there seems to just be one track. They seem to put every kid on the same, everybody's going to be a chemical engineer when they go, when they go to college.
Mhm.
But, for most people, they don't need to take high level calculus, they don't need to take high level chemistry or any of these things to major in whatever it is they're going to major in when they go to college, and certainly they won't need it in their career. So when I talk about strategic planning, and the other thing is when you're looking at outside activities for your high school, um, a lot of people here, people will take, do volunteer work, and they might
Mhm.
volunteer at the retirement home, or they might volunteer at the rescue, the animal rescue, and they're just doing all this stuff to fill up their resume.
Yes.
Everything is to put on your resume. That's all old school. So what I say is, let's put together a strategic plan so that we're actually looking at your child's future. Where do you think your child's going to go?
Mhm.
Um, and then let's plan a course. Let's chart a course to put them on that trajectory.
Mhm.
So, as an example, my son, because he's very good in math and science, loves STEM stuff, and he loves all things aerospace, engineering, airplanes. He can tell you all about airplanes if you take them apart. He knows everything. So I figured he would major in maybe aerospace science, maybe he'd want to go to the Air Force, maybe want to be a pilot. And he was on that trajectory. So this is part of the reason why I have him taking Algebra 1 starting in 7th grade, because I'm needing to get him through all the high level maths.
Mhm.
Well, so I had his whole trajectory. We're doing stuff. We're going to the Air Force Base. Air Force Base has, stuff that kids can get involved in. We're getting in all this stuff that's aerospace related. So any outside activities that he was doing other than sports, it's all aerospace related to have him on that trajectory. And then he tells me he doesn't want to do that. He wants to go to business school. So fine. So now, he's interested in real estate development, real estate investment. And so now we're switching it. And so now I'm actually happy because now all I'll need to take is business math to get into the business school. So great. He can probably have that knocked out while he's in high school. So, but I'm planning everything that I'm planning, his courses that I'm planning for him now.
Mhm.
I'm planning them. I'm not simply signing up because this is what everybody takes.
Yes.
So, if he's going to have to take accounting when he's in the business school, we might be able to have him take an accounting class at the junior high school, at the junior college. He might be able to get out of that requirement by the time he gets to college. And so I'm planning everything strategically, because when he sits down and he's ready to write his essays for his college admissions, any kid, they've got to be able to write a story. And most kids don't have a story to write. But if
Mhm.
they've spent every year for the prior 3 or 4 years, working with a real estate developer, or
Yeah.
shadowing this person, or getting involved in real estate deals, things like that, that really helps them to write their story. and all of their activities are in line with that story, and it makes them a better candidate. Schools are not looking for just well-rounded, oh, I was in the Spanish club, I was a captain of the football team anymore, and I have good grades. They're looking for kids that can blend to the kaleidoscope of freshman admissions. They're looking for kids who will be active on campus. They're looking for kids who will bring some kind of contribution because of their past experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I talk about, I help families not just get up and going, but truly strategically plan their kids' education.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the future. Everybody doesn't need to take chemistry. Not everyone needs to take chemistry. Not everyone needs to take calculus 2. Not everyone needs to take that stuff. But the way schools are set up, everybody's taking the same classes.
Yeah.
And so, my thing is I prefer to see kids do a lot of really great stuff outside of the class.
Yeah.
I'm not even really going to push AP with my particular child because he's an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I want him to have good grades in his regular class. He's got his sports, but then I want him to really have a great contribution outside of the
Mm-hmm.
classroom. I think that's going to be more important. He'll have the test scores, he'll have the grades, but what else does he bring to the table?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that I talk about when I talk to people about strategically planning.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might have if you have that kid who wants to be a geologist, there's so many things that child classes that they can take,
Yes.
activities they can get involved in outside of the classroom that can really, really create an incredible experience, not only as a student, but that will help him to really write an impressive story about what he's been doing when he's in 11th grade writing his college essays.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to point out two things. One is that it's okay to change the plan, like you
As you see.
yeah, it's not a set plan forever, right? It can change because children do change their mind. But another big thing that happened out there is that he didn't go into college thinking, I want to be this aero,
Yes.
pilot or something
Yes.
And he did 3 years and realized, I don't like this anymore,
Yes.
right? He know
Yes.
it already. He want to be in business, right? So see, that's help.
Yes.
Yeah.
It absolutely. So many kids go into college undeclared
Yeah.
because they have no idea what they want to do, and they go and take a bunch of classes, and then you wonder why they either don't graduate or it takes them 6 years to graduate.
Yeah.
By strategically planning their activities really towards where they think they want to go, it helps do exactly what you just said. It either confirms that this is what they love, or it helps them to scratch it off the list. Which is important. If they can do that, if they can really truly have it narrowed down by the time they go into college. And again, this whole home education thing is really designed, I help people design it to head that stuff off. You don't want your kid going into college undeclared. It's the biggest waste of time and money.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, it really helps all around.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So, there's also IEP, right? Educational, individualized education plan. That is a little different than this. This is more for anybody can have it. Every kid should have it.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned an IEP because a lot of parents have asked about that very thing. Their kids are on IEPs, or I think they call them 504 plans.
Mm.
And so what I tell people whose children are on IEPs, it's again, have your child assessed
Yes.
outside of the school setting. And there are many ways that you can do that without it costing you an arm and a leg. Have your child independently assessed. If it's just one subject, you determine whether you can help them with that subject, or you just find somebody, a tutor, who can help them with that one subject.
Yeah.
If it's my kid needs extra time doesn't matter when you're in homeschool. They have all the time that they need. My sixth grader doesn't even take tests when she's going to sixth grade. She's never even had a test. I'm starting to have my seventh going to eighth grader take tests now that he's taking outside classes. They have tests and grades. But they never took tests. Why? Because I wasn't concerned about taking a test and getting a grade. What I was concerned about was mastery. What I was concerned about was them learning the material. So if they took an assessment, we'll call it an assessment, and this is like the end of the chapter assessment. If they did the assessment and they missed stuff, it wasn't a matter of we're writing a grade and we're going on. We are going to go back. Maybe you guys didn't understand it at all. Maybe we just need to go and redo the chapter to discuss it more, to make sure that you understand it. Yes. And so technically all the final grades were A's, because by the time we finished with all the material, they had full mastery of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so now, as my son's getting older, he's moving towards high school, he is going to start getting grades and having traditional tests. But again, when they're young, the goal should be for them to learn. Yeah. And have that wonder, and not be afraid to make a mistake, and not be afraid to not know the answer, to want to ask questions without fear of penalty. And so that's why we didn't do formal grading in the younger years, because I wanted a firm foundation. Yeah. I wanted firm mastery without penalty.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you so much for all your knowledge, sharing your knowledge, and really appreciate that. Learned a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you.